Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Certainly Allah's deen is Islam. 3. 19. What is Islam? Translation of Islam Kiya Hai? What did Allah say? The Quranic perspective. Ghulam Ahmed Parwez 1964. Talui Islam Trust. Registered. 25B, Gulberg 2, Lahore. 4. Intellect and Deen. In the previous chapter, the fact that the development of the human self occurs through those laws which are received through Wahi and that Wahi is not a product of the human intellect, was presented. Its source is not the human mind. This does not mean that the facts and the system of life which revelation puts forward cannot be understood through human intellect either. This point will be clarified later. 4.1 Limits of human intellect. At this point, this much should be understood. That intellect also strives to discover the truth, but just as an eye, without binoculars, can only see up to a certain extent and not beyond it, similarly the scope of the intellect has certain limits. It is not able to do any research and investigation about matters which are outside this scope. Secondly, whatever research is done through the use of human intellect, we can never truly say at any point that this is the final word on this subject, i.e., that there is nothing beyond this. In this regard, a professor of physics, Professor James Arnold Crowther of Reading University, writes, "The system of nature is so enthralling in its profound basic simplicity that in the world of science the final word on any subject has to be left to the last man." Translated from Urdu. This limitation and scope of the intellect is with regard to the external universe. As far as the human world is concerned, in this its mode of research is different. In this connection, its technique is empirical. 4.2 Empirical technique. Human intellect takes a single issue, ponders on a solution for it, and then begins to experiment on this solution. After experimenting for centuries, it is found that the experiment has failed and that particular solution was wrong. Then it considers another solution, and starts to experiment on this, and in this way after many failed experiments it achieves success. During this period, the degree of loss which humanity suffers can be judged from the pages of history. For example, when man started living a social life, his intellect wished to decide what sort of system should be devised for the solution of his collective matters and the mutual conflicts between individuals, tribes, and nations. He started this experiment with autocratic rule. The experience of centuries showed that this method is very damaging for the development of humanity. He then came up with another solution. When this one failed as well, another solution was put forward. In this way, gradually and slowly, intellect has reached the stage of democracy. Now, consider how many centuries it took for the human intellect to reach democracy from the initial form of government. And during this period how many rivers of blood mankind had to swim through, and how many ditches of fire had to be negotiated. And even this democracy does not provide a guarantee of peace and tranquility. With this one illustration, we can imagine and evaluate other issues of life. 4.3 Religion and intellect. We have seen above that the scope of action of the intellect is limited and its modus operandi is empirical. But its limitation does not mean that man should chase it with a stick and throw it out of the human world. If the eye can only see to a certain limit and cannot go beyond this, it does not mean that a sane individual should burst his eye due to this limitation. But the self-created religion of people, whose basis in reality is of that mysticism which originates from an erroneous view of Platonic thought, did this very thing to human intellect. All the religious literature of the world, whether belonging to Shariat or Tariqat, is filled not only with repudiation and criticism of the intellect, but is full of condemnation and denunciation. So much so, that even our prevalent religion, i.e., that of Muslims, which is a derivative of this same mysticism or is a collection of beliefs influenced by it, in the pursuit of this, declares the same about the human intellect. Hence, from every podium and platform of ours this voice is raised that the intellect and Iman are two contradictory elements which can never coexist in one place. Iman is the name of shutting your eyes and blindly accepting something. Iman cannot be attained through intellect, reasoning, wisdom, sense, knowledge, vision, logic, and evidence. And then to support such a doctrine, such invented narrations are presented in which, for example, it is stated the place of foolish people is paradise. This is the state of the followers of Shariat. The followers of Tariqat are 100 steps ahead even of them. It appears that the whole mission of their life is only to condemn intellect and reasoning so severely that no sane person should wish to come anywhere near this evil. Amongst them, knowledge is declared to be Hijab-e Akbar, the Great Veil. 4.4 Intellect and the Quran. After looking at these self-created beliefs of people, let us see what the Quran says on this issue. If we wish to sum up the Quranic teachings in just a few words, then we can declare unhesitatingly that the Quran is Zarb Kalayemi. Strike by Moses. Against pharaonic trickeries and Tasha'i Ibrahimi. Acts of Abraham. Against stone idols. It uprooted all these destructive beliefs of life which were lying as a great obstacle in the path of humanity, from their roots. As far as the subject under discussion is concerned, it has bestowed a very high status to human intellect. First of all, we see that in an animal it accords the status of special differentiation to the trait of human intellect. It says that in the early stages of creation both man and animals had one path. He began the creation of man with clay. 32. 7. The beginning of human life was, like animals, also from inorganic matter. Then, after going through various evolutionary stages, it reached that point where the process of reproduction takes place through birth, and made his progeny from a quintessence of the nature of an insignificant fluid. 32. 8. Up till this point there was no difference between man and other animals. But he fashioned him in due proportion. 32. 9. Then, according to the law of evolution, after refining and perfecting him, a special balance and proportion was created in him. From here, that destination was reached from which he became different from other animals, so different that the Quran called it a new creation. Then we created out of it another creature. 23. 14. At this stage Allah bestowed on him something of his energy, and breathed into him something of his energy. And he gave you the faculties of hearing and sight and thinking, and understanding. 32. 9. You were given senses through which you process information about your external environment, and with these, given a mind from which you draw conclusions using your intellect and reasoning. After this, the Quran states that there are very few among you who use these correctly. 32. 9. 4.5 The worst of creation. The first stage of human knowledge is perceptual knowledge. After this, the second stage is conceptual knowledge. All this is a result of intellect and reasoning, which is an exclusively human trait. No other creation of the universe shares this trait. The Quran explains in clear words that those who do not use this exclusive differentiating trait, i.e., intellect, are the worst of creation. For the worst of beasts in the sight of Allah are the deaf and the dumb, those who do not use intellect and reasoning. 8. 22. In the world of religion, the ultimate aim of human life is declared to be to save oneself from the torment of hell. The Quran says, "Come, and we will tell you which people will go to Jahannam. Many are the jinns and men we have made for hell, due to their deeds. They have hearts wherewith they understand not, eyes wherewith they see not, and ears wherewith they hear not. They are like cattle, nay, more misguided. For they are heedless of warning." 7. 179. About them in Surah Al-Furqan it is also stated, Or do you think that most of them listen or understand? They are only like cattle, nay, they are worse astray from the path. 25. 44. Do you think that there is a majority among them who hear and make use of their intellect and reasoning? By no means. They are merely cattle, in fact even more astray than them. Cattle at least make use of whatever direction they receive from nature. 4.6 Who are the inhabitants of Jahannam? Hell. Regarding the inhabitants of hell, in another verse, it is stated, they will further say, had we but listened or used our intelligence, we should not now be among the companions of the blazing fire. 67. 10. In Surah Yasin it is stated that at the time of the manifestation of results, mankind will be reminded that you were told, do not follow Satan, he is your open enemy. Only follow and obey Allah, as this is that very path which will take you to the intended destination of life. But he did lead astray a great multitude of you. Did you not then understand? 36. 62. He misguided many parties among you. Did you not use your intellect and reasoning, that you became deceived by him? Now, this is the hell of which you were warned. 36. 63. This is that hell about which you were informed that, if you do not make use of your intellect and reasoning and if you follow your desires, your abode will be in it. From these explanations, it is clear that, according to the Quran, the differentiating trait between man and animals is the ability of intellect and reasoning. 2. Those people who do not use this ability live their life at the level of animals, indeed lower than them, and are the worst of creation. 3. They are those people who Satan traps in his web of deception and the ones whose abode is hell. 4.7 Reasoning and insight. The invitation of the Quran is entirely an invitation based on knowledge and vision. At every step, it directs us to use our thinking and reasoning and places emphasis on the use of intellect and consciousness. It asks about those people who refuse this invitation. Do they not reflect in the Quran? 4. 82. These are the same people about whom in another place it is stated, such are the men whom Allah has cursed, for he has made them deaf and blinded their sight. Do they not then earnestly seek to understand the Quran, or are their hearts locked up by them? 47. 23-24. These are those people who become deprived of the ability to think and reflect due to not using their intellect and reasoning. Despite having ears, they are deaf, and despite having eyes, they are blind. It is astonishing that these people do not think and reflect on the Quran. What, do they have locks on their hearts? After explaining its commands and values, the Quran states, thus does Allah make clear to you his signs, in order that you may consider their bearings on this life and the hereafter. 2. 219-220. Allah makes his commands clear for you in an unambiguous fashion so that you are able to reflect and reason on their immediate benefits and on the consequences yet to become manifest in the future. Pay particular attention to the fact that in this verse emphasis is placed on thinking and reflecting on both this life and the life of the hereafter. 4.8 Use of intellect and reason in war. In a situation when armies are facing each other in a battlefield, it is commonly said and understood that the army whose soldiers have emotions and sentiments of greater intensity will fight with greater courage and valor. Thus, they will be victorious. Intellect and reasoning has no place in war. If soldiers start to think in this situation, then none will be willing to lay down his life. Only blind emotions can be of use there. But even in this kind of place, the Quran emphasizes making use of intellect and reasoning. It addresses the Jamaat of Mu'mineen, saying that if among you there are 100 soldiers who are those who will use courage and perseverance, then they will be able to overcome 1,000. Or at least 200 of the enemy's men. This is because If 100, they will vanquish 1,000 of the unbelievers. For these are a people without understanding. 8. 65. The opposing party does not make use of intellect and reasoning, whereas you never let the faculties of thinking and reasoning slip from your grasp, even during such a trying time. From the above it is clear how much importance the Quran assigns to intellect and reasoning. In this regard, there is a verse in Surah Saba which is so comprehensive that in it the Quran has condensed all these details in just a few words, and if it were said that on this subject this is the last word, then it would not be an exaggeration. Now reflect that Rasulullah remained busy throughout his life in inviting and preaching and presenting the Quranic teaching to the people in various ways. Day and night, he remained engaged in announcing and disseminating his message. It is obvious that Quranic teaching has many aspects and facets. It embraces every aspect of human life. The vastness of its teaching does not recognize any limits and is boundless. But ponder on this: that for this kind of vast and boundless knowledge, its messenger addresses his listeners, saying, I do not wish to say a great deal, I only wish to say one thing, just one thing. Say, I do admonish you on one point. That you do stand up before Allah. It may be in pairs, or it may be singly. 34. 46. Just imagine how important will this one matter be? It will be such a description into which the whole teaching of Islam can be condensed, and which is the hallmark of this divine guidance. Every person will be eager to listen to such a description, if not to accept it, then even simply out of curiosity as to what it is. After this, the messenger says to them that this is not such a fact which can be listened to while just sauntering along, it needs to be heard by halting and standing stock still. If you all do not wish to stop, then it is fine, you can stop singly, or in pairs, and stop for Allah's sake. Reflect how, in this manner, what psychological refinements are implied. When, in this way, he had drawn all attention towards him, he said, so listen to what that one thing is which I wish to relate to you, and within which all other matters are encompassed. That one thing is. And reflect within yourself. 34. 46. 4.9 Reflect. Pay attention and reflect, think, endeavor to understand, use your intellect. Once you start to use intellect and reasoning, then you will adopt the right path. This is because the invitation that we extend to the right path is an invitation based on evidence and reason. Our appeal only occurs through knowledge, vision, reasoning, and wisdom. Say you, this is my way. I do invite unto Allah, on evidence clear as the seeing with one's eyes, I and whoever follows me. 12. 108. If you have a disagreement with this invitation, then present your argument and evidence in support of your assertion. Say, produce your evidence if you are truthful. 2. 111. 4.10 Present your reasoning. To keep on wrangling like this without knowledge and vision, and facts, and evidence, can never be called the right approach. But why do you dispute in matters of which you have no knowledge? 3. 66. Leaving aside disputing with others, you yourself should not argue about something regarding which you have no knowledge. And pursue not that of which you have no knowledge. 17. 36. And then the knowledge should not be guesswork, and skeptical. It should be such certain knowledge, the evidence for which is provided by your hearing, your seeing and your mind. The Quran states, for every act of hearing, or of seeing or of feeling in the heart will be inquired into. 17. 36. As has already been stated, the beginning of knowledge is with perceptual knowledge. Hearing and seeing relates to this knowledge, and our mind relates to conceptual knowledge. Therefore, only that knowledge is capable of being called knowledge in which the evidence of the senses and support of the mind is present. Presumption and conjecture can never be called knowledge. 4.11 Presumption and conjecture is not knowledge. Therefore, regarding those who oppose the truth, the Quran states, "But they have no knowledge therein. They follow nothing but conjecture. And conjecture avails nothing against truth." 53:28. Leaving aside presumption and conjecture, in this regard the Quran goes so far as to state that merely casting a cursory glance at something is not enough. Only that observation in which thinking and reasoning is involved has any meaning. Hence, regarding those people who used to attend the meetings, sermons and gatherings of Rasulullah, and used to watch and listen to him perfunctorily while their thoughts were adrift elsewhere, the Quran states, "If you call them to guidance, they hear not. You will see them looking at you, but they see not." 7:198. They appear to you as if they are looking at you, but in truth they see not. This subtle difference between nazar, simply looking with the eyes, and basr, comprehending what is being said while seeing, is worth examining. As the Quran states, "Among them are some who pretend to listen to you. But can you make the deaf to hear, even though they are without understanding?" 10:42. But since they do not listen to your words with their hearts, they do not reflect on what is being said and do not make use of their intellect and reasoning. Therefore, this listening of theirs is not in reality hearing. These are not those who have eyes, but are, in reality, blind. And among them are some who look at you. But can you guide the blind, even though they will not see? 10:43. See also 47:16. 4.12 Merely knowing the language is not sufficient. Some people say that those people whose native language is Arabic, or those who understand Arabic, must be familiar with the meanings of the Quran. It is correct that to understand the meanings of a book it is essential to know the language in which the book has been written. But it does not necessarily follow that by merely knowing the language, the meanings of this book will also be comprehended. In order to understand its meanings, it is necessary to make use of thinking and reasoning, and intellect and mindfulness. This is why, in Surah Hud, in reply to the invitation of the messenger Shu'aib, his people used to say. They said, "O Shu'aib, much of what you say we do not understand." 11:91. Even though it is obvious that Shu'aib used to converse with his people in their own language. In the case of Rasulullah himself, the first recipients were the Arabs, but from amongst them only those accepted Iman who used to ponder over the message of the revelation using their intellect and reasoning. The ones who did not do this were not able to recognize the truth and reality of this message. When the messenger used to reflect on their condition, and see how the wrong path on which they were treading was leading them to the hell of destruction and ruin, his heart would ache like that of a zealous physician, and he wished to somehow or other bring them onto the right path and save them from destruction, even if force had to be used on them for this. In reply to this wish and desire of his, it was stated that Iman is only that which is accepted after rational thinking and reasoning. 4.13 Iman is only that which is based on rational thinking and reasoning. Any argument which is accepted through force is not Iman. Because Iman is accepted with the willingness of the heart and the satisfaction of the mind. See, in this regard the Quran states, "You would only, perchance, fret yourself to death, following after them, in grief, if they believe not in this message." 18:6. Even though, if the purpose had been to make people Muslims by force, then what difficulty was there for Allah in simply creating man in such a way that he, like other animals, would be obliged to follow a single path only? But he did not do this purposely. He has given man free will and choice, and the inevitable consequence of this freedom to choose is that whichever path he wishes, he can adopt. If it had been your sustainers' will, they would all have believed, all who are on earth. Will you then compel mankind, against their will, to believe? 10. 99. It is therefore wrong that you should attempt to make people mu'min by force. Iman is achieved according to Allah's established laws. No self can believe, except by the will, law of Allah, and He will place doubt on those who will not understand. 10. 100. Those people who do not make use of their intellect and reasoning, remain in doubt and suspicion, and the truth is never made plain to them. In their sight, the matter is never clear, therefore only those who make use of their intellect and reasoning can accept Iman. Here the Quran states that if someone is made to accept something by force, it can never be called Iman. Iman is only that which is based on intellect and reasoning. It is obvious from this that to coerce someone means that this person is not able to use his intellect and reasoning. One form of such coercion is putting a sword on someone's head and saying to him, accept whatever you are being told, otherwise you will be beheaded. It is obvious that in this situation the question of using one's own intellect and reasoning, and making a decision based on free choice does not even arise. The second form is to suspend intellect and understanding through some other method, so that the individual does not even remain capable of thinking and understanding, and by being thus suppressed by another, rather through fear, accepts whatever he asserts. This is called superstition. 4.14 Iman cannot be accepted by seeing a miracle. In several places, the Quran, addressing Rasulullah, states that these people demand of you, show us a miracle, then we will have Iman at your invitation. Tell them that Iman means to accept something through the use of intellect and reasoning. To accept something after seeing a miracle cannot be called Iman. For example, a person claims that whatever I say to you is absolutely true and its proof is that I can walk on fire. It is obvious that his walking on fire cannot be termed as proof for his first claim. Hence, the Quran has made it clear that Rasulullah was not given any miracle other than the Quran. It states in Surah Al-An'am, if their spurning is hard on your mind, yet if you were able to seek a tunnel in the ground or a ladder to the heavens and bring them a sign, what good? If it were Allah's will, He could gather them together unto true guidance. So be not you among those who are swayed by ignorance and impatience. Those who listen, in truth, be sure, will accept it. As to the dead, Allah will raise them up. Then will they be turned unto Him. 6. 35-36. O Messenger! If this matter weighs heavily on you as to why these people are rejecting your message, then if you possess the ability to do so, find a tunnel in the earth or erect some ladder up to the heavens, and in this way show them some miracle. You can try doing this, but it will not be possible to make them mu'min in this way. If the aim was to make everyone a mu'min in this way by force, then Allah could have done this with great ease according to His law of will. Therefore, do not become one among those who are ignorant of reality, despite knowing everything that you do. Remember that only those who listen to the message of truth with their hearts say labbaik. Yes, I accept it. 4.15 The ability to reason vanishes. The Quran has also stated that, regarding those people who do not use their intellect and reasoning due to arrogance and prejudice, or due to the following of ancestors blindly and because of ignorance, then after a period of time not even a vestige of the ability to think and reason remains in them. This is a great truth for which the Quran has provided guidance. Biologists say that when a limb remains unused, then after a while, nature, considering it to be redundant, makes it unusable. This species then becomes deprived of this limb forever. This is that reality towards which the Quran has signaled by saying that the people who make this their practice, that whatever is presented to us we will reject without thinking and reflecting, and having once rejected it, we will continue to keep rejecting. In them the ability to reason and reflect finishes. Indeed, those who disbelieve, it is all the same for them whether you warn them or do not warn them, they will not believe. Allah has set a seal upon their hearts and upon their hearing, as per His law, and over their vision is a veil. and for them, as a consequence, is a great punishment. 2. 6-7. For the people who adopt the path of rejection, warning them or not warning them of the destructive consequences of their life is equivalent. Having once rejected, they will never admit the truth. The consequence of their following such a path is that Allah's law of requital puts seals on their hearts and ears and their eyes are covered by drapes. Their end is extremely tragic. This is because then we sent after him messengers to their people, and they came to them with clear proofs. But they were not to believe in that which they had rejected before. Thus we seal over the hearts of the transgressors. 10. 74. They reject truth and reality merely because previously either they or their ancestors have rejected this. In this way Allah's law of requital seals the hearts of these transgressors. 4.16 How are hearts sealed? These seals are the consequences of their very own actions. By no means. But on their hearts is the stain of that which they do. 83. 14. The reality is not that which people think of their own accord, that Allah randomly puts seals on the hearts of people. The actual truth is that the deeds of these people themselves become rust and stains their hearts. Their state is such that, verily we have propounded for men, in this Quran every kind of parable. But if you bring to them any sign, the unbelievers are sure to say, you do nothing but talk vanities. Thus does Allah seal up the hearts of those who understand. Not 30. 58-59. When the law of Allah is presented to them, they do not arrive at some conclusion by using their intellect and reasoning. Their first reaction is that this messenger giving the message is fraudulent. After this, they totally refuse to accept it. In this way Allah seals the hearts of those who do not make use of their intellect and vision. And who does more wrong than one who is reminded of the signs of his sustainer, but turns away from them, forgetting the deeds which his hands have sent forth. Verily we have set veils over their hearts lest they should understand this, and over their ears, deafness. If you call them to guidance, even then will they never accept guidance. 18. 57. The sealing of hearts means that their hearts turn away from the truth, and all this because these people do not make use of their thinking and reasoning. Allah has turned their hearts from the light. For they are a people who understand not. 9. 127. 4.17 The eyes of the hearts become blind. The Quran has made it clear that wherever it is stated that veils descend over the eyes of such people and they go blind, do not think that this means that the eyes on their faces split, and they actually become physically blind. No, this is not the case. The eyes on their faces do not become blind, it is the eyes of their hearts which are losing their light. Do they not travel through the earth, so that their hearts and minds may thus learn wisdom and their ears may thus learn to hear? Truly it is not their eyes that are blind, but their hearts which are in their chests. 22. 46. 4.183 Ways to understand the Quran. In the verse quoted above, the Quran has directed travel through the earth. By this, the mind turns towards that aspect in which the Quran informs us of the method by which to understand it. It states that the technique to assess a message or a system is 1. Assess it in the light of the level to which the knowledge of your era has reached, and see what fatwa you get from the court of knowledge. 2. Or, observe from among the nations of the past, what the consequences were of the nation which lived its life under the system, and what was the outcome of the one which went against it. 3. And the third method is that whichever group is following the system, let it work according to this peacefully, and after this its results will demonstrate themselves whether the system is true in its claims or false. In Surah Yunus it is stated, nay, they charge with falsehood that whose knowledge they cannot compass, even before the elucidation thereof has reached them. Thus did those before them make charges of falsehood. but see what was the end of those who did wrong. 10. 39. Reflect how the Quran, by suggesting these three methods, has clasped all aspects of knowledge and action in it. It has stated that either man should look at the Quranic truths via the point of view of knowledge, for this it is essential that he should have access to the latest facts of his era, or he should ask the pages of history as to what was the outcome of living life according to such a system. And the third method is a pragmatic test according to which the outcome of any system can be judged to be right or wrong. This method encompasses all three eras, bygone eras through historical evidence, the state of development of knowledge of the modern era, and the outcome of actions and their impact on future time. The third method was the one on which Rasulullah had put special emphasis because those people did not wish to learn any lessons from the fates of past nations. Nor was their knowledge so wide that they could use it as a basis to check the proclamations of the Quran. Therefore, the messenger used to repeatedly tell them, "Say, O my people, do whatever you can. I will do my part. Soon will you know who it is whose end will be best in the hereafter. Certain it is that the wrongdoers will not prosper." 6. 135. It is evident from this that Iman in the revelation of the Quran can only be achieved through knowledge and reasoning. Whether this is through ideological reasoning or through the evidence which you witness of the results of the system defined through revelation. In any case, the edifice of Iman is established on the foundation of knowledge and vision, and intellect and reasoning. Apart from this, there is no other way to understand and accept the truth. 4.19 The blind one and the one who has eyes are not equal. The Quran has declared in very clear terms that the people who do not use knowledge and vision, and intellect and reasoning, can never be like those who make use of their intellect and reasoning. Say, can the blind be held equal to the seeing? Will you then understand not? 6. 50. See also 11. 24, 13. 16. In another verse, it is stated, "The blind and the seeing are not alike. Nor are the depths of darkness and the light. Nor are the shade and heat of the sun. Nor are alike those that are living and those that are dead. Allah can make any that He wills, as per His law, to hear. But you cannot make those hear who are buried in graves." 35. 19-22. The only one who can be made to hear, according to the divine laws, is the one who himself wishes to listen. By condensing this reality into just a few words as follows, it is stated. Say, are those equal, those who know and those who do not know? It is those who are endued with understanding that pay attention. 39. 9. For those people who make use of intellect and reasoning, the paths in front of them leading towards Allah will keep opening up. And those who strive in our cause, we will certainly guide them to our paths. For verily Allah is with those who are righteous. 29. 69. Therefore, Iman is only acquired through intellect and reasoning. And to whatever great an extent any individual or any nation makes use of their intellect and reasoning, the paths of life before them will keep expanding to just as great a level. 4.20 What is the motive of a deed? After Iman, the question of deeds comes before us, and regarding deeds it is said instinctively that these are exclusively related to emotions, not to intellect and reasoning. By provoking the emotions, you can motivate man to do ever greater tasks. In this way, he becomes willing for any kind of sacrifice, so much so that he does not even hesitate or waver in laying down his life. If, at this time, a man sits down to consult his intellect, it will never grant him permission for this sacrifice and selflessness. If you converse with anyone on this subject, he will present it as an established fact that only emotions can be the motive for action, not intellect. But in this aspect too, instead of being carried away by emotions, the Quran presents the reality. It states that by inciting emotions you can get someone to act on an emergency basis, but neither strength in actions is developed by this, nor does it help to develop character. It is through steadfastness and perseverance that character is shaped. Hence, in describing the traits of the Mu'minin, it states, "Those who, when they are reminded with the signs of their sustainer, droop not down at them as if they were deaf or blind." 25. 73. 4.21 Deeds should also be based on intellect and reason. Obviously, when the instruction is to use intellect and reasoning in the case of the divine commands themselves as well, then how can it be declared admirable to be inclined to act in other matters merely on the basis of emotions? The truth is that trust can never be put in emotive people. It is possible that at one time you may inflame their emotions to the extent of even laying down their life, but on another occasion, they may not be willing to even give you an anna. Trust and reliance can only be placed on those who adopt a path based on their intellect and reasoning, and whatever step they take is after due thinking and reasoning. These are the people who will steadfastly tread the highway of life with determination and perseverance, and will thus ultimately reach their desired destination. About them, the Quran says, "In the case of those who say, 'Our sustainer is Allah,' and, further, stand straight and steadfast, the angels, universal forces, descend on them. Fear you not, nor grieve, but receive the glad tidings of the garden of bliss, the which you were promised." 41. 30. 4.221 Doubt. At this point an important and delicate question arises which befuddles the minds of those who think cursorily. They say that all the trouble and suffering prevailing in the world is not due to those who are foolish, but is because of those people who possess great mastery in intellect and reasoning. The world is, in reality, an arena of a battle of wits. Here, from morning till night, a battle continues between intellects. The one who is the greatest master of intellect and intelligence is the most cunning and clever, and snatches away everything from those of lower intelligence by the use of deception. Moving forward from individuals, this is the same situation for nations. The nation which is more astute, enslaves, politically or economically, the nation which has less intellect. 4.23 Intellect itself is devious. Not only does their intellect continually communicate such tricks to them through which they keep fleecing the nations possessing less intellect, it also provides such reasoning which justifies their political and economic ruses, making these appear very attractive and pleasing in the eyes of the world. So much so that, at times, based on such reasoning, these actions begin to appear admirable in the eyes of these individuals or nations themselves, and they unwittingly begin to view themselves as being righteous. In other words, human intellect not only deceives others but also deceives the person possessing this intellect. Professor Joad's remarks deserve careful consideration. Reason tends to be exhibited as a mere tool or handmaid of desire. Its function is to secure the ends which we unconsciously set ourselves. By inventing excuses for what we instinctively want to do, and arguments which we instinctively want to believe, reason is the power of deceiving ourselves into believing that what we want to think true, is in fact true. In another place, he says, "A man's thought follows his desire much as the feet of a hungry dog follow his nose." The Quran also supports this reality that if man is overtaken by his emotions and makes these his God, like a drunk, his intellect does not remain capable of guiding him correctly. The Quran states, "Do you see such a one who takes for his God his own passion? Could you be a disposer of affairs for him? Or do you think that most of them listen or understand? They are only like cattle, nay, they are worse astray in path." 25. 43-44. 4.24 Desires enslaving intellect. They do not remain as humans but instead descend to the level of animals, in fact even worse. In another verse, it is further clarified that those people who keep following their desires gradually reach such a state that even the ability to think and reason no longer remains in them. Such are men whose hearts Allah has sealed, as per His laws, and who follow their own lusts. 47. 16. They possess knowledge and intellect, but just as in an intoxicated state a man's intellect and consciousness is of no use, on being conquered by emotions also knowledge and vision become useless. Then do you see such a one as takes as his God his own vain desire? Allah has, knowing him as such, left him astray, and sealed his hearing and his heart and understanding, and put a cover on his sight. 45. 23. The consequence of this then is that, according to the law of requital of Allah, despite intellect and reasoning, he strayed from the path, and his ears and heart became sealed, and his eyes were veiled. 4.25 The demise of nations possessing vision. After narrating the condition of past nations, the Quran states that these were not destroyed because they did not possess knowledge and vision, these were destroyed because their emotions of self-interest made their wrong path appear very attractive and pleasing in their eyes, and these were destroyed despite possessing intellect, reasoning, vision, and knowledge. Remember also, the Ad and the Tamid peoples clearly will appear to you from the traces of their buildings, their fate. The evil one made their deeds alluring to them, and kept them back from the path, though they were gifted with intelligence and skill. 29. 38. In another verse, and we had firmly established them in prosperity and power which we have not given to you, Arabs, and we had endowed them with faculties of hearing, seeing, heart and intellect. But of no profit to them were their faculties of hearing, sight, and heart and intellect, when they went on rejecting the signs of Allah. And they were completely encircled by that which they used to mock at. We destroyed aforetime populations round about you. And we have shown the signs in various ways, that they may turn to us, to this message. 46. 26 to 27. 4.26 Emotions and the Quran. From these explanations, it seems, apparently, as if, according to the Quran, intellect, which it said had such a high status, is nothing when faced with emotions, and emotions do not permit man to come to the right path. Therefore, man is left completely helpless at this point. The Plato magic, Vedanta and mysticism has prescribed the following solution to this problem, that emotions be destroyed, so that there should neither be any bamboo and nor will the flute play. But the Quran declares this mentality as monasticism, and states that this is a self-created doctrine of men which does not have the authority of Allah. 57. 27. Firstly, because the Quran recognizes that emotions can never be eliminated, the most you can do is suppress them. But the state of emotions is such that if they are suppressed from one side, then to escape and emerge. These create 10 other ways to manifest themselves, and these ways are so destructive that the human self becomes severely entangled in them and chaos is created in society. In psychological terms, it means that due to the perversion of emotions, repression is born. Secondly, if it is accepted that emotions are the reason for the destruction of man and the only cure is to eliminate them, then it will mean that Allah has created alongside of man such a thing which is completely evil. 4.27 Virtue and Evil. According to the Quran, this concept about Allah is false and misguided. Allah is completely good and He has not created any such thing which is in itself evil and whose solution could only be its own elimination. He has created various types of forces in the world. The way in which these forces are used makes them either good or evil. If the sword is used to halt the hand of a tyrant, then it is virtuous. If this is used to cut the throat of an innocent, then it is evil. Emotions contain tremendous force within them. If this power is left unbridled and rebellious, its consequence is destructive. If it is channeled in the right direction, then it produces constructive results. Therefore, using something correctly is good and using it in the wrong place, even to the extent of wasting it and not using it, is evil. According to the Quran, emotions are not such a thing from which one should run far away and by declaring them to be hateful, attempt to eliminate them. The Quran states that when emotions are utilized under the guidance of revelation, then constructive results are produced. And if without this guidance, these become rebellious and cross all limits, then the consequences are ruin and destruction. Hence, the Quran states, "But if they hearken not to you," the Quranic message, "then know that they only follow their own desires. And who is more astray than one who follows his own lusts, devoid of guidance from Allah? For Allah guides not people given to wrongdoing." 28. 50. If these people do not listen to your message or accept it, this is not because after using their intellect and reasoning they have reached this conclusion that your message is not worth accepting. It is because these people are following their own desires, emotions. And who is more misguided than the one who follows his emotions without guidance from Allah? Remember, the law of Allah does not guide such people who do not keep the various powers and energies in their rightful place. 4.28 Intellect in the light of revelation. From these explanations this reality is made clear to us that if emotions are made use of in the light of the divine revelation, then those results are manifested for which emotions were created. But it is obvious that emotions do not contain the ability to think and understand. This is the task of intellect. In other words, whatever the Quran has declared means that if the intellect functions under the guidance of revelation, then such strength is produced within it, that it causes emotions to follow behind, instead of becoming the slave of emotions. This means that the intellect which becomes overpowered by emotions and thus ends up becoming its tool, is raw and undeveloped. The intellect which is trained within the guidance of the revelation becomes so strong that it cannot be suppressed by emotions, instead it gets work done by them according to its own will. In summary, it can be understood like this: that intellect alone becomes overwhelmed by emotions, but intellect and revelation both together remain in control of emotions. This is the reason that the Quran has declared in very clear terms that Satan can never overcome those people who tread under the guidance of revelation. 4.29 How intellect is trained through revelation. The question now arises as to which matter revelation helps the intellect to understand, due to which it acquires such strength that, instead of following emotions, it causes these to follow it, and in this way keeps producing constructive results instead of destruction. This question is very important and deserves profound attention and reflection. It is easily understood that the human intellect always adopts that thing in which it views its own interest. The person who considers his own interest is called a wise man. The one who desires his own loss is called foolish, or rather mad by everyone. Hence, the duty of intellect is to think of its own interest, and it is that duty from which you cannot prevent it. You will often have seen that a person is doing some business, and after a period of time, he leaves this and starts some other business. On being questioned, he says that though there was no loss in the previous business, there is more profit in the present one. Therefore, the human intellect discards that work in which there is less benefit. But this also happens that the intellect takes on a business believing there to be great advantage in it, whereas instead of there being benefit in it, there is loss. It is obvious from this that it is not a must that what the intellect considers to be profitable, is indeed profitable. From the above, it is evident that if the intellect can be convinced that there is a greater benefit in something, then it will adopt it. 2. If, after experimenting on some matter, it sees that what was said by an individual is correct, then after that it will trust other things said by that person and will continue to place trust in him until there is a loss in some matter. 4.30 Wealth for life and life for honor. Now we will proceed forward. There is a famous quote among us which says, "Wealth for life and life for honor." This means that while wealth has its own value, if such a situation ever arose where only one thing could be saved between wealth and life, then for the sake of life, wealth should be sacrificed. At such a time, a person who does this is considered wise. This means that according to the intellect, saving life is more profitable compared to wealth. Therefore, if there is ever a tie between wealth and life, then the human intellect will sacrifice wealth and save life. And if a situation ever arose where there was a tie between life and honor, then the one who is wise will even sacrifice his life to protect his honor. Everything which has been said above means that each one of wealth, life, and honor has its own intrinsic value. But firstly, there is a difference in their values, i.e., life has a higher value than wealth and honor has a higher value than life. Secondly, honor is so valuable that it cannot be sacrificed for anything, but wealth and life are such things which can be sacrificed for the attainment of more valuable things. 4.31 Relative and permanent values. In other words, wealth and life are relative values, but the value of honor is permanent or absolute. The task in hand is to inform the intellect about the value of a thing in life and which are the things possessing permanent values. It is clear from this that until the permanent values are not defined and established, it is not only difficult, but in fact impossible to ascertain what thing it is essential to sacrifice in order to protect some other thing. This is the foundation of ethics. 4.32 Deen defines the different values. In the previous chapters we have stated that Deen informs us of that way of life, by following which, the caravan of humanity can reach its destination. Or it provides us with that system of life according to which the development of the human self takes place. Now we have reached the point where it can be said precisely, what does Deen give us? In one sentence, Deen defines various values. We have seen that one concept of life is that man is defined by his physical body. The purpose of life is the satisfaction of the physical needs of the body, and all this takes place according to physical laws. Obviously, according to this concept of life, values will be defined from the physical viewpoint. For this, there is neither any need for external guidance, nor any requirement for a source of knowledge beyond the intellect. What are the things that are required to fulfill the physical needs of man? Along with physical nourishment, emotive aspects are also included in these needs. And which among these is more important and valuable, and which is less? When there is a tie between two things, then which one of them should be adopted and which one should be abandoned? This can all be determined by the human intellect and experience. Who does not know that, when there is a tie between wealth and life, then in order to protect life, wealth should be sacrificed? For this, there is no need for guidance via revelation. The preservation of life is a natural human instinct. Indeed, of all animals, which is verified by his intellect, experience, evidence, and study. But, as already stated, the second concept of life is that a human being is not the name for merely his physical body. Apart from his body, there is another thing also which is called the human self or ego. Just as there are needs of his body, his self also has requirements. In the same way that nourishment and development of the body takes place, similarly, nourishment and development of his self also takes place. Just as there are laws established for the nourishment and development of the body, in the same way there are also laws established for the nourishment and development of his self. Be aware that, as noted in Chapter 1, a human being is a single unit which is manifested through the body and the self. Therefore, from the Quranic point of view, the human body and itself are not two antagonistic elements which remain in opposition with each other, nor is one of them evil and the other good. A human being is defined by both, and nourishment and development of both is essential. 4.33 The Quranic system of ethics. But in the same way that there is a difference in the values related to the physical body, some value is more important and another less. And in the case of a conflict between two values, the less important value has to be forfeited in favor of the more valuable one. Similarly, when there is a mutual struggle between a value of the body and that of the self, then, since the human self is more important when compared to the body, therefore the value related to the body has to be given up in favor of the value of the self. As at the time of a conflict between honor and life, life should be sacrificed to protect honor. Those values which help to nourish and develop the human self, enabling it to achieve infinite life, are superior and invaluable compared to those whose relation is only with the protection and nourishment of the body. This is the foundation on which the edifice of the Quranic system of ethics is raised. 4.34 Only revelation can provide the permanent values. The question is, can these permanent values be ascertained through human intellect and reasoning? The Quran declares that this is not a matter within the remit of human intellect, these can only be ascertained through revelation. This verdict of the Quran is one that is also supported by philosophers and ethical scholars of the West. On this point, we cannot do better than quote the words of Martin Buber. The absolute values cannot, of course, be meant to have only subjective validity for the person concerned. Don Juan finds absolute and subjective value in seducing the greatest possible number of women, and the dictator sees it in the greatest possible accumulation of power. Absolute validity can only relate to universal values and forms, the existence of which the person concerned recognizes and acknowledges. Rashdal makes the same point. That there is one absolute standard of values, which is the same for all rational beings, is just what morality means. In the following passage, Rashdal contends that what is controversial is not the existence of an objectively valid moral law, but only the manner of its existence. We say that the moral law has a real existence. That there is such a thing as absolute morality. That there is something absolutely true or false in ethical judgments, whether we or any number of human beings at any given time actually think so or not. Such a belief is distinctly implied to what we mean by morality. The idea of such an unconditional objectively valid moral law or ideal undoubtedly exists as a psychological fact. The question before us is whether it is capable of theoretical justification. We must then face the question, where does such an ideal exists, and what manner of existence we are to attribute to it. Certainly, it is to be found, wholly and completely, in no individual human consciousness. Men actually think differently about moral questions, and there is no empirical reason for supposing that they will ever do otherwise. Where then and how does the moral ideal really exist? Having reached the conclusion that the moral standard must be based on a universal and absolute system of values, Rashdal proceeds to tell us that such a system can have its source nowhere but in the divine mind. An absolute moral law or moral ideal cannot exist in material things. And it does not, we have seen, exist in the mind of this or that individual. A moral ideal can exist nowhere and nohow but in a mind. An absolute moral ideal can exist only in a mind from which all reality is derived. Our moral ideal can only claim objective validity insofar as it can rationally be regarded as a revelation of a moral ideal eternally existing in the mind of God. Regarding revelation, we have seen that the Nabi gets this from outside, it does not gush forth from the depths of his own heart, i.e. it has objectivity. The Quran uses the term nuzul, descending. For this, Bergson discusses the question whether it is possible for human intellect to reach reality and gives a negative answer. Not through intelligence, or at least through intelligence alone, can man do so. Intelligence would be more likely to proceed in the opposite direction. It was provided for a definite object, and when it attempts speculation on a higher plane it enables us at the most to conceive possibilities. It does not attain any reality. Einstein had written a book titled, Out of My Later Years, in the later part of his life, and he writes, "For science can only ascertain what is, but not what should be. And outside of its domain value judgments of all kinds remain necessary. Representatives of science have often made an attempt to arrive at fundamental judgments with respect to values and ends on the basis of scientific methods, and in this way have set themselves in opposition to religion. These conflicts have all sprung from fatal errors. For the scientists, there is only being but not wishing, no valuing, no good, no evil, no goal. These values can be received through revelation, the characteristics of which, according to Jode, who prefers the term intuition to revelation, are: intuition is its own authority and carries with it the guarantee of its own authenticity. For those truths which we know intuitively, no reason can be adduced, simply because they are not reached by a process of reasoning. Reason no doubt may be enlisted later to produce arguments in their favor. As the following passage shows, Professor Cassirer, too, does not credit reason with the power of apprehending the highest values. In Greek philosophy, the power of reason was extolled as the highest power of man. But what man could never know, until he was enlightened with a special divine revelation, is that reason itself is one of the most questionable and ambiguous things in the world. From these explanations, it is evident that the source of the permanent values is divine knowledge, and their availability is through revelation. 4.35 The permanent values affect the human self. Let us now take a further step forward. In the example which we quoted earlier, i.e., wealth for life, life for honor. It will be clear to everyone that to save life one should spend wealth, because life is related to the human body. Everyone knows and feels what harm is sustained by the loss of life. But not every individual can feel what harm is sustained if honor is lost. This does not result in any material loss to man, this loss is related to something which is non-material, and this is human personality. If some individual does not accept the existence of the human self, then for him the loss of honor will not be any loss. The most we can say is that this will result in damage to a reputation within society. But a stain on a reputation only occurs in that society in which honor is considered a valuable commodity. But the question of loss of honor does not even arise in a society in which honor is not held as a valuable commodity. For example, among us, if some unmarried girl, unfortunately, becomes pregnant, then for her this is something worthy of such condemnation that she would prefer to die. But since in Europe such a pregnancy is not viewed as wrong, there is no question of dishonor. This makes it clear that the permanent values are those whose benefit or loss, directly and intrinsically, affects the human self. Therefore, for the permanent or absolute values it is essential to recognize the existence of the human self, and with it to recognize this truth that by neglecting these values, though the human body does not suffer any loss, the human self suffers a loss. In other words, it is essential to accept that every deed of man does have a consequence, and that no deed of his can remain without an effect. This is called the law of requital. Those deeds which benefit the human self provide support in its development. And when the human self becomes developed, then it attains infinite life. 4.36 The need for Iman. For this it is necessary that after the physical death of a human being, the existence of the continuity of life should be accepted. This is called having Iman in the hereafter. In other words, 1. Iman in Allah. 2. Iman in the human self. 3. Iman in the continuity of life, the hereafter. 4. Iman in the law of requital. 5. And Iman in this fact that the creation of the universe and of man himself is with a particular purpose as part of a special program. See how beautifully the Quran describes in 2 verses all that has been said above. In Surah Al-Yathiyah it states, Allah created the heavens and the earth for just ends, and in order that each self may find the recompense of what it has earned, and none of them be wronged. 45. 22. After this it states, Then see you such a one as takes as his God his own vain desires? Allah has, knowing him as such, left him astray, and sealed his hearing and his heart, and understanding, and put a cover on his sight. Who, then, will guide him after Allah? Will you not then receive admonition? 45. 23. Such a person can only come to the right path in the event that he desists from worshipping his emotions, and follows the divine laws. The people who follow their emotions are those who consider human life to be merely a physical life and do not believe in the existence of the human self and its life in the hereafter. And they say, what is there but our life in this world? We shall die and we live, and nothing but time can destroy us. But of that they have no knowledge. They merely conjecture. 45. 24. But this belief of theirs is not based on knowledge, it is merely based on conjecture. The only verdict which will be received from the font of knowledge will be that there is definitely something within man which is not annihilated with his death, it holds within it the potential to endure and the ability to continue forward. In another verse it is stated, therefore shun those who turn away from our message and desire nothing but the life of this world. That is as far as knowledge will reach them. Verily your sustainer knows best those who stray from his path, and he knows best those who receive guidance. 53. 29-30. You should stay clear of the individual who avoids our laws, because he only has the interests of physical life in his view. He is in no way convinced of the continuity of life and the immortality of the human self. Their total knowledge is confined only to physical laws. 4.37 Who can have iman in the permanent values? The Quran has made it clear in these verses that only that individual can have iman in the permanent values who does not consider life to be a physical life only, but is also convinced of the existence of the human self, the law of requital and the life in the hereafter. For the one who is not convinced of these facts, neither having iman in Allah has any meaning for him, nor is he convinced of any code of morality. This is because the code of morality is indeed the other name for the permanent values. And only he can believe in the permanent values who is convinced of the human self, the law of requital and the continuity of life. When, in this way, human intellect and vision accepts the permanent values, then instead of following after emotions, it directs these to follow it, and then intellect itself treads in the light of the divine revelation. This combination of revelation and intellect is declared by the Quran as being the characteristic of the Mu'mineen. Behold, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the alternation of night and day, there are indeed signs for men of understanding, men who keep in view the laws of Allah, standing, sitting and lying down on their sides, and contemplate the wonders of creation in the heavens and the earth. With the thought, our sustainer, not for naught have you created all this. 3. 190-191. These are the men of vision about whom it states, say, not equal are things that are bad and things that are good, even though the abundance of the bad may dazzle you. So fear Allah. Stay within the laws of Allah, O you that understand, so that you may prosper. 5. 100. They are the ones it declares as being the holders of iman when it says, therefore fear Allah. Keep in view the laws of Allah, O you men of understanding, who have believed. Have iman. 65. 10. In other words, according to the Quran, Momin and Mutaqi can only be men of vision. In another verse it states, but those endued with knowledge and iman will say, indeed you did tarry, within Allah's decree, as per his law, to the day of resurrection, and this is the day of resurrection. But you were not aware, as you never considered it a possibility. 30. 56. In other words, iman, knowledge, and vision are essentially bound up with each other. Without knowledge, man cannot reach iman. Belief is only that belief which an individual has acquired through his own vision and evidence. The following statement of Locke is commonly quoted among people who are philosophers and possess knowledge. He that takes away reason to make way for revelation, puts out the light of both. But see how many centuries before Locke the Quran had already proclaimed this reality, that knowledge and iman, revelation and intellect, are essentially complementary to each other. As has been stated above, iman is only that iman which knowledge and evidence support. The result of acquiring iman in this way is that the emotions of these people follow their intentions. If it ever happens that some wrong idea comes to them while out and about, then they immediately bring to mind the divine laws and inquire of them as to which is the correct path. The moment the divine laws come before them, all darknesses immediately vanish and the right path emerges clearly before them. Those who fear Allah remain within the divine laws. When a thought of evil from Satan assaults them, bring Allah to remembrance. Bring these laws to mind. When lo, they see aright. 7. 201. As soon as the light of the revelation appears before them, the whole environment is brightly illuminated and they immediately make a decision in its light as to what they should do. This is that technique of the Quran through which it causes the intellect to accept the importance of the permanent values. And when in this way the intellect accepts these facts, then it treads in the right direction in the light of the revelation and human emotions follow along behind it. The name of this remarkable combination of revelation, intellect, and emotions is life based on Islam. In this, every individual with the full conviction of his mind and the full gladness of his heart sells his life and wealth into the hands of Allah, and his intellect congratulates him on this transaction of his. Allah has purchased of the believers, Mu'mineen, their persons and their goods. For theirs in return is the garden of paradise. 9. 111. This is because, based on his vision and on evidence, he has satisfied himself that obedience to those permanent values which have been defined through revelation will result in profit only, and that there is not even an iota of any possible loss to the righteous. When it is said, "What is it that your sustainer has revealed?" they say, "All that is good." To those who do good, there is good in this world, and the home of the hereafter is even better, and excellent indeed is the home of the righteous. 16. 30. When the intellect understands the truth and importance of these values, then, instead of going towards those destructions to which rebellious emotions beckon, it follows the voice of the revelation which is in reality profitable for him. This is because the propensity of the intellect is always to go towards that direction which appears profitable to it. 4.38 Conclusion of the discussion. You can comprehend everything which has been said in the previous pages regarding revelation, intellect, and emotions in the following brief summary. 1. The status of human intellect is like a force which will result in consequences according to whichever way it is used. 2. When human intellect, dissociated from emotions, researches and investigates the secrets and hidden treasures of the external universe, then it reaches the correct conclusion through its own empirical technique. This is called the scientific method of research. The Quran places great emphasis on the importance of this method because through this the forces of nature are harnessed, and only through the harnessing of nature does man attain the status of a human being. 3. However, in the case of mutual relations between humans, when this same intellect follows emotions, i.e., when this force is used by human emotions, then a battle of wits erupts in this world which results in the spilling of blood and creating mischief on earth. 2. 30. In the terms of the Quran this is called the obedience of Satan. 4. Emotions instigate human actions, and so these are also a great resource and power for man. But this power can only produce constructive results in that situation where it is not allowed to overwhelm the intellect. 5. The technique for this is to make the intellect the protector of the permanent values, which man receives through revelation. When man, having dissociated himself from his emotions, thinks and reasons using his intellect and knowledge. The importance of these values springs before him, and in this way his intellect declares their protection and supervision to be its responsibility. To be thus convinced by the human intellect about the significance of the permanent values is known as iman. 6. In this way, man's emotions, and his intellect, both of which are exceptional forces, become the means of attaining the defined objective set by iman. And in this way the forces of nature, instead of causing the destruction of humanity, result in becoming the continuing basis for development and civilization. This is the status of a mu'min, i.e., a human being who keeps his emotions within the control of his intellect and keeps his intellect in the service of the revelation. Through the application of this technique, by achieving balanced development, his self is enabled to tread the evolutionary stages of life. This is the very aim of the Quran. From these explanations it is evident that the edifice of Deen is established on the permanent values. Details of these values will be found in a later chapter.